I never imagined that one day I'd look at my wife and feel like a stranger in my own home. But that's exactly what happened the night Lauren sat across from me at the dinner table, folded her hands together like she was preparing for a job interview, and said the words that unraveled everything. Ethan, I don't think I want to be married anymore. No warning. No build-up. Just those words, cool, quiet, practiced. I stared at her, fork halfway to my mouth. The lasagna I'd made was still steaming. She hadn't touched her plate. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard, but her face told me otherwise. Her eyes didn't flinch. She didn't even look sad. She looked resolved. What? I asked, finally setting my fork down. Where is this coming from? She gave a soft sigh and glanced at the wall behind me, like the idea of facing me directly was too much effort. I felt this way for a while, she said. I just didn't know how to say it. But I think I'm done pretending. Pretending. That word hung in the air like the smell of burnt toast. Sharp. Lingering. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Was there someone else? Did I do something wrong? Could we fix it? But my throat closed up. My stomach flipped. Lauren stood up without finishing her meal and left the room. I sat there in silence, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock above the sink. Our kitchen, once filled with laughter, weekend pancakes, music drifting from her phone, suddenly felt sterile. Cold. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She poured her coffee, scrolled through her phone, reminded me to pick up more laundry detergent. I watched her move through the space like an actress in a play she no longer enjoyed, going through the motions, reciting lines out of obligation. So, about what you said last night, I started, cautiously. She didn't look up from her mug. Yeah, are you really serious? She finally glanced up. I meant what I said, Ethan. I don't feel it anymore. The spark. The connection. I don't even know if I ever really did. That last sentence, that one hit like a sucker punch to the ribs. After 10 years of marriage, to hear that the whole thing might have been a lie? I couldn't even breathe properly. I need time, she said. Space. I'm not saying I'm moving out tomorrow. I just need to figure myself out. It was like she was already gone, just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. The days after that were mechanical. We coexisted under the same roof like two polite roommates. She took over the guest room. I tried to focus on work, but my brain refused to cooperate. Emails blurred into nonsense, meetings passed without meaning. I started staying up later, just to avoid the silence of our separate routines. I'd sit on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through shows we used to watch together. The cushions still smelled faintly like her perfume. A week in, she started coming home later. No explanation. No conversation. Just, I had a thing, or don't wait up. And I didn't ask. I wanted to God. I wanted to, but I was afraid of the answers. Instead, I cleaned. The house, the garage, even the attic, any space I could scrub, organize, or rearrange. If I could just control something, maybe I wouldn't feel so powerless. One night, I found an old photo album in a box in the attic. Our wedding. Our honeymoon. Random selfies in airports and bookstores. Lauren laughing in the sun. Me with my arms around her shoulders. I remembered how real it had all felt. How certain. I sat on the attic floor with the album open on my knees, feeling like a fool. How had we gotten so far apart? And how had I missed it? I thought about the promises we'd made, about the conversations we'd had in the dark when we still whispered dreams into each other's skin. I wondered if she remembered them, if they had meant anything to her, or if I'd just been holding on alone. Lauren's presence became a ghost in our home. She floated through rooms with the grace of detachment, not cold, just unreachable. It wasn't anger I felt. Not yet. It was worse than that, confusion mixed with helplessness. Like watching someone slowly walk off a cliff and realizing they don't want your hand. She stopped wearing her wedding ring. I noticed it one evening when we crossed paths in the hallway. She was holding a bag of laundry, and her left hand brushed against mine by accident. I looked down. Bare finger. Pale and dent where gold used to live. No announcement. No drama. Just gone. I didn't say anything. I just stood there after she'd walked away, staring at the absence. The ring had meant something to me, not the metal, not the price, but the promise. I guess I still thought promises mattered. The next week, I got a call from her sister, Rachel. We hadn't spoken in months. Maybe years. You okay? She asked after a long silence. Her voice was gentle, but I could hear the weight behind it. I don't know, I admitted. She told me, Rachel said, that she's stepping away. Stepping away? I repeated, bitterly. That's what we're calling it now. She's confused, Ethan, Rachel said. She's going through something. I wanted to scream. Instead, I bit down on my own frustration. She said she needs to find herself, that she lost her identity in the marriage. I exhaled. And what am I supposed to do? Just stand here and applaud her enlightenment while I get erased? You don't have to applaud anything, Rachel said. Just try not to become someone you'll hate when this is over. The call ended, but her words lingered. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, something I rarely did, and sat outside in the cold. The air had that late winter sharpness, like it hadn't quite committed to spring yet. Just like us, I thought, caught between what was and what might be. I realized then that I had spent the better part of a decade trying to be dependable, solid, predictable. I did the chores, I handled the bills, I made her coffee every morning even when we were barely speaking. I was a good man. I was a good husband. But I wasn't seen. Maybe she wanted more. Maybe she didn't even know what she wanted. But I knew what I didn't want anymore, to keep offering help, presence, effort, and love to someone who turned away each time. A quiet decision formed in me that night, slow but sure. If she no longer wanted to be my wife, truly, deeply, then I would no longer act like her husband. Not out of revenge. Not even anger. Just reality. The shift started subtly. I stopped making coffee for two. I stopped folding her laundry when I did mine. When the car needed an oil change, I didn't mention it. When the bills came, I paid only my share. She noticed. Of course she noticed. But she didn't say anything. She didn't protest. That was the hardest part, how easy it seemed for her to let me go. But the hardest part for me? Realizing how easily I'd been taken for granted. 2 weeks later, she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. Not snooping, not really, but I saw her email. The top one was from someone named Evan. The preview line read, "Last night was everything. Can't stop thinking about it." I closed the lid. Quietly. Deliberately. Then I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. I wasn't angry. Not in the way you'd expect. I wasn't heartbroken. Not exactly. I was numb. A clean, cold numbness, like stepping outside in December without a coat. Everything felt sharp and too bright. And I realized in that moment, I was already alone. We shared a house, a mortgage, a grocery list, but nothing else. Not touch, not laughter, not trust. When she got home that night, I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't ask about Evan or what last night had been. I simply said, "I'm moving into the guest room. Permanently." She blinked, caught off guard. Okay, that was it. No questions. No protests. Just one word. And that silence told me more than a confession ever could. I slept with the door closed that night. And for the first time in months, I actually slept. I started rebuilding my life in increments. Joined a gym. Started running in the mornings. Signed up for a local photography class, something I'd always wanted to try but had never made time for. I began cooking for myself, not just food, but meals, real meals, with flavor and care and music playing in the background. The more I pulled away, the more she seemed confused, like she hadn't expected me to detach, like she thought she'd break me and I'd keep waiting for her to come back. But I didn't. The truth is, I didn't even want her to anymore. Not like this. Because something in me had shifted, too. I was done begging to be loved. Done trying to hold something together by myself. Done pouring into a cup that never filled back. It's strange how grief doesn't always show up in tears. Sometimes it shows up in the silence of your own routines. I'd come home after work, cook for one, do the dishes while a podcast played in the background, and realize that not one part of my life required anyone else anymore. And I couldn't tell if that was freeing or devastating. Lauren still lived in the house, but we no longer orbited around each other. We occupied parallel realities, separated by drywall and closed doors. We didn't argue. We didn't reconcile. We just disappeared from each other's lives while standing 10 feet apart. People started to notice. At work, colleagues asked how the wife was, and I gave vague answers. Busy, I'd say. Doing her own thing. It wasn't a lie. It also wasn't the truth. But what do you say? She's emotionally exited the relationship, and I'm just now realizing I don't miss her the way I thought I would. Yeah, no. Even my mom called, concern thick in her voice. I had a dream about you, she said. You were sitting in a room full of mirrors, but none of them reflected you. That image stuck with me. Mirrors with no reflection. A man going through life, but not really visible, not even to himself. I started journaling. It felt juvenile at first, something teenagers do in spiral notebooks, But after a few days, it became like oxygen. I wrote everything. My anger, my loneliness, my guilt, my memories, my fantasies of packing a single bag, driving west, and disappearing into a mountain town where nobody knew my name. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want closure anymore. I wanted clarity. The first time Lauren actually looked at me, really looked, was almost 3 months after her announcement. I'd just come in from a run, sweat drying on my shirt, music still echoing in my headphones. She was in the kitchen, pouring wine, barefoot in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt. She looked surprised. Not because I came in, but because I looked different. "Have you lost weight?" she asked. I nodded. 20 pounds. She blinked. Well, then silence again. But something had shifted in her tone. Not warmth. Not nostalgia. Something closer to curiosity. She started asking more questions after that. About the gym. About my photography. One night she noticed I wasn't home and actually texted, "You out late?" I didn't answer. It wasn't pettiness. It was self-respect. Because I'd finally realized I didn't owe her anything. Not anymore. She'd made her choice. Now I was making mine. There's a moment in every break, not the explosive kind, but the slow, decaying kind, when you realize the center is no longer holding. That was the moment I walked into the living room and saw her crying. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just silent tears falling down her cheeks as she sat curled on the couch in a blanket. Her phone lay face down on the table. A half-finished glass of wine beside it. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to sit down, to ask, "What's wrong?" But I didn't. I just stood there, like a guest in someone else's sadness. After a minute, she looked up. "I didn't think you'd actually stop loving me," she whispered. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, not because I felt pity, but because she had finally said what I knew she feared all along, that this time, the door wouldn't swing back open. I sat in the chair across from her. Not beside her. Not close. "I didn't stop," I said. "I just stopped waiting." Her eyes widened slightly. "I loved you so much," I continued. "I gave you everything I had. And when you pulled away, I stayed. I tried. I kept showing up. But you stopped seeing me. And I can't keep handing pieces of myself to someone who doesn't want them." She wiped her face. "It wasn't about you." "Maybe not," I said. But I was still there. I still got hurt. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Because this wasn't about who was right or wrong. This was about damage. Accumulated. Ignored. Accepted. Until one day, there was nothing left to fight for or with. A few days later, she asked if we could talk. We sat on the back porch, wrapped in sweaters, watching the sky turn gold. "I miss us," she said. "I miss who we were," I replied. "But I don't know if that exists anymore." She looked down at her hands. "Do you think we could ever get it back?" I didn't answer immediately. Because part of me still loved her. The part that remembered her laugh, her freckles, the way she used to trace circles on my wrist when we watched movies. But another part, a deeper, more grounded part, wasn't sure that was enough anymore. Finally, I said, "Only if we both rebuild it. From the ground up. Not pretend the cracks aren't there." And for once, she didn't offer promises. She just nodded. Quietly. Honestly. That night, I went to bed alone, but I didn't feel lonely. Because I'd finally returned to myself. And even if we never repaired what was broken, I knew now. I wasn't lost. I was healing. The following weeks settled into something new. Not peace, not reconciliation, but a delicate kind of neutrality. Lauren and I spoke more, but not often. When we did, it was practical, cautious, like coworkers who once dated and didn't want to reopen old wounds. I thought I'd feel more anger, resentment, maybe even hope, but what I felt most was stillness. Like I'd been clinging to a branch in a river for so long, exhausted by the current, and finally, I let go. And the water? It didn't swallow me. It carried me. One night, she asked if we could cook dinner together. It felt innocent, like a suggestion between two people who used to know each other well and now weren't quite sure how to act. I agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly because some part of me still wanted to understand what remained. We made stir-fry, chopped vegetables, passed sauces, talked about nothing. It wasn't awkward, just unfamiliar. At one point she laughed, genuinely, at something I said. It caught both of us off guard. Her hand brushed mine when we reached for the same bottle of soy sauce. We didn't pull away, but we didn't linger, either. That night we ate at the table, like we used to. No TV, no phones, just us. It should have felt like a step forward. It didn't. It felt like a memory reenacted by different people. A few days later, I got a message from someone in my photography class, Maya. We talked a few times after class, always casually. She was kind, with a calm presence and a soft sense of humor. She asked if I wanted to grab coffee after Saturday's session. I said yes. It wasn't a date, but it wasn't not one, either. We met at a little cafe tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. Maya ordered tea. I got a black coffee. We sat outside, letting the breeze do the talking while we got past the obligatory small talk. She asked about my work. I asked about her dog. We laughed about the ridiculous number of photos we'd taken of doorways and shadows in class. Then she paused, looked at me for a long moment, and said, "You seem like someone who's just now remembering how to breathe." I smiled. That's probably the most accurate thing anyone said to me in months. We didn't kiss. We didn't touch. But something in me softened. That night, back home, Lauren was watching a movie on the couch when I walked in. She looked up and smiled, like old times. I smiled back, politely, and went in my room. There was no guilt, no betrayal, just truth. I told her the next day. We were in the kitchen, having our first real conversation in days. I don't know why I felt like I owed her honesty, maybe because, despite everything, I wanted to leave nothing hidden. "I met someone," I said. "Nothing happened. But I thought you should know." She froze, put her mug down slowly. "You mean, you're dating?" "No, not really. But I might." She nodded slowly, but her lips tightened. I didn't think it would feel like this. I stayed silent. I wanted space. I needed time. I thought I'd come back, and she stopped. I don't know what I thought. I didn't respond. It wasn't cruel. There just wasn't anything left to say that wouldn't reopen the old script. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I know," I replied. And I did. I truly believed she didn't set out to hurt me. She just didn't realize how far she'd wandered until she turned around and found I wasn't behind her anymore. That weekend, I took a solo trip to the mountains. It wasn't planned. I just got in the car and drove. No GPS. No playlists. Just the sound of the road and the hum of my thoughts. I found a small cabin rental on a hill overlooking a quiet lake. No Wi-Fi. No TV. I sat by the fireplace and read. Hiked. Took photographs. Slept deeply. One morning, I stood barefoot on the cold porch, coffee in hand, watching fog move over the water like a slow exhale from the earth itself. And I realized something simple but profound. I wasn't broken. I'd been wounded, yes. Hollowed out, even. But beneath all the emotional debris was still me, whole, steady, quietly alive. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I'd already chosen myself. And maybe that was the love I'd been searching for all along. When I returned home, the air in the house felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just resigned. Lauren was packing. "I think I'm going to move out," she said. "It's time." I nodded. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Rachel offered me her guest room until I figure things out. "I hope you do," I said, sincerely. She looked at me. I sobbed. "So do I." We hugged. For the first time in what felt like years, it wasn't a hollow motion. It was human. Two people who'd once shared a life now saying goodbye, not angrily, not bitterly, but honestly. She left that afternoon. I stood at the window as her car pulled away, a small cloud of dust kicking up behind her. And for the first time in a long, long time, the house felt quiet, not in a lonely way, but in a clean one. Like something new could finally begin. The silence in the house became my companion. At first, it felt unfamiliar, an absence I wasn't sure how to live inside. There were echoes in rooms that used to hold conversations, footsteps that only belonged to me, and closets that suddenly had space. But slowly, that silence became sacred. I started lighting candles at night just because I liked the glow. I played music I hadn't listened to in years. Sometimes I'd dance barefoot in the living room, not for anyone, not to be seen, just to remember that I still could. I didn't rush to fill the emptiness. I let it teach me. Lauren texted a few times over the following weeks. Always brief. Always polite. "Do you want the mixing bowls? Found your old charger? Want me to drop it off? Just checking, did I leave my birth certificate in the file drawer?" I answered when I had to. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't open either. Something between us had finally settled, not in reconciliation, but in acceptance. We weren't angry anymore. We just weren't us. What we had wasn't a failure. It was a season, one that had run its course, and I'd stopped trying to extend it. Maya and I kept seeing each other. It began with more coffee, then walks through the park. She had a way of listening that made silence feel warm instead of awkward. She asked good questions. She didn't try to fix me or fill space with advice. She just showed up. One afternoon, we sat on a bench watching a golden retriever chase leaves like they were fireworks. I laughed. You laugh like someone who forgot how, she said. I looked at her. That's because I did. She reached over, not to hold my hand, just to gently touch my arm. But you remembered. That matters. We didn't kiss that day. We didn't have to. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up in stillness, in steadiness. In the person who sits with you, not above you, not in front, trying to pull you along. Just beside you, quietly saying, I'm here. By mid-spring, I'd repainted 2 rooms in the house. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted the space to reflect who I was becoming. I donated the dishes we'd received as wedding gifts, boxed up the photos that belonged to another version of myself, and finally took down the framed wedding picture by the staircase. Not in anger. In closure. I replaced it with one of my photographs, a quiet shot of the mountains at sunrise. The same cabin trip where I realized I was healing. I called it beginning. One night, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Lauren. I sat at the kitchen table, stared at it for a long while before opening it. Inside was a single page. Ethan. Thank you for not hating me. Thank you for loving me as long as you did. And thank you for letting me go when you realized I couldn't love you in return the way you needed. I've started therapy. I'm learning things about myself I didn't want to face. I'm sorry it had to happen the way it did. But you deserved better than the version of me you got. And I think, no, I know, you're finally getting it. I'm rooting for you. Lauren. I folded the letter slowly, placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Not to forget it, but to remember that not all endings are cruel. Some are just necessary. Maya came over for dinner that weekend. I cooked, she brought wine, and we talked late into the evening. No expectations. No roles to play. Just presence. After dessert, I asked her if she believed people could truly start over. She smiled. Not start over, but start again from where they are now? Absolutely. We stood in the kitchen, music playing low. And then, gently, carefully, we kissed. It wasn't fireworks. It was steady. It was honest. It was real. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the rain tap against the windows. I thought about everything. The first night Lauren told me she didn't want the marriage anymore. The quiet agony of watching it unravel. The slow, steady walk back to myself. And now, this place I'd arrived, not where I thought I'd end up, but somewhere better. Wiser. Calmer. Truer. Healing doesn't come with a celebration. It comes with a quiet morning when you make coffee for one and realize it's enough. It comes with knowing you have survived your own unraveling and lived to tell the truth of it. And the truth was, I wasn't the man I had been. I wasn't broken. I was becoming. Summer arrived slowly, like someone walking barefoot through a quiet house. You don't notice it at first, but one day you step outside and the air feels softer, fuller, like it's finally willing to hold you again. The backyard filled with light. My tomato plants, which I'd half-heartedly planted back in April, were suddenly taller than the fence. I started waking up without an alarm. Just the sun. Just the birds. Just me. Maya was coming over more often. Not in the way that made the walls shift, not like a hurricane blowing through, but like someone opening windows after a long winter. She brought books. Music. Stories. Once, she brought nothing but a smile and a peach pie and said, "Let's just sit today." And we did. For hours. On the porch. Barefoot. Laughing at nothing. She never asked about Lauren. That was what I respected most. She let the past be mine, not hers to dissect. She didn't need to know the timeline of my grief to accept the person it had shaped. And maybe that's why I trusted her more than anyone. She didn't ask me to explain the ache before she believed I could love again. One evening, after the sun dipped low and fireflies danced above the grass, we lay on a blanket in the yard, fingers barely touching. She turned her head toward me and said, "You don't flinch anymore." I blinked. "What?" "Your eyes," she said. "When I first met you, it was like you were always bracing for something. Like your soul had a seatbelt on. Now, you breathe deeper." I smiled. Not just with my mouth, with something deeper. "I stopped waiting to be left," I said. She nodded. "That's when the real beginning happens." Lauren texted me once in July. Just a short message. "Hope you're well. You seem happy." That makes me happy. I replied with a simple, "Thank you. I hope the same for you." And I meant it. It had taken months and most of my pride to stop needing closure to look forward. Not every story needs a final scene. Sometimes it just fades out gently, and the silence after becomes the most honest part. I never heard from her again. I spent a weekend with my parents at the lake. They noticed the change right away. My mom, always intuitive, watched me closely during breakfast and finally said, "You're different." I paused, unsure whether to brace or smile. "I was worried you'd get hard," she continued. "That what happened would turn you cold." I reached for my coffee. "It almost did." "But it didn't," she said. "You chose softness." And that was the first time I realized that healing isn't always about patching holes. Sometimes it's about remembering who you were before the world told you to toughen up. By late summer, Maya and I took a short road trip upstate. No plans. No itinerary. Just 2 overnight bags and a playlist full of songs we kept pausing to talk through. We stopped in little towns, ate diner pie, bought secondhand records and a weird cactus we named Dave. One night, we stayed in a tiny cabin on the edge of a forest. It had no TV, no signal, just us and the hum of trees and crickets. Lying in bed, with the window cracked open and her hand on my chest, I whispered something I hadn't said in a long, long time. "I'm glad you're here." She looked at me in the dim light, eyes soft and steady. "I'm glad you let me be." We didn't need to say more. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was holy. Returning home felt different this time. Not because I didn't want to come back, but because for the first time, the house felt like mine dash. Not a reminder of what had been lost, but a canvas of what could be created. I opened the drawer where Lauren's letter still sat. I took it out, read it one last time. I smiled, folded it carefully, and then, quietly, without ceremony, I burned it in the fire pit in the backyard. Not out of spite, but out of reverence. Because some things deserve to be released with warmth. Maya and I didn't talk about the future in terms of rings or timelines. We talked in terms of presence. What do you need today? How's your heart? Is there anything you're not saying? It wasn't perfect. Some days were quieter than others. Sometimes I'd still flinch at sudden sounds or feel waves of doubt in the dark. But she didn't try to rescue me. She just stayed. And for the first time in my life, I understood. Love isn't rescue. It's recognition. It's not someone coming to fix you. It's someone seeing you fully and staying anyway. Fall came in quietly, like it didn't want to interrupt anything. The air thinned, the light softened, and the trees began their slow unraveling. My street filled with the smell of wood smoke and wet leaves, and every morning I woke up to the sound of crows and the breeze whispering through the windows. Maya started leaving a toothbrush at my place, then a drawer full of clothes. Then, one evening, she brought over a potted lavender plant and placed it by the kitchen window. "I thought this corner needed something alive," she said. I watched her gently pat the soil and realized she wasn't moving in. She was rooting in. It wasn't sudden. There was no dramatic declaration, no candlelit moment of, "I think you should live here." It just happened, in the way real things do. Quietly, naturally, as if the house had always made room for her, and we were just catching up to that truth. I started writing again. Not just journaling. Real writing. I began putting together essays, short stories, fragments of conversations I'd had with myself in the dark months. Some were about heartbreak, others about growth. A few were about nothing at all, just little observations, like how the sunlight on the bedroom wall in October looks like melted gold, or how Maya always hums when she brushes her teeth. I sent one to a local magazine, not expecting much. They published it. The title was simple, After the Leaving. It was about how endings don't always look like the ones in movies. Sometimes they come with quiet exits, unopened texts, or a half-drunk glass of wine on the counter. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they come with a beginning so gentle you barely realize you've started over. One weekend, Maya and I drove up to that same cabin where I'd gone alone after Lauren left. It was just as quiet, just as simple, but everything about it felt different. We sat on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket, drinking tea. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You're lighter here." I smiled. It's where I remembered who I was. Later that night, lying beside her, I whispered, "I don't need you." She turned her head slightly, curious but unbothered. "And I don't want to be needed," she replied softly. "I want you," I said, "because you choose me. Not because you're trying to fix me. Not because I'm filling a space." She kissed my forehead. That, she said, is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. We fell asleep to the sound of wind through the trees, not clinging, not searching, just resting. I've stopped measuring my worth by what I can give or how much I can endure. I no longer think love means sacrificing myself to hold someone else up. I've learned to walk away without hating what I left behind, to hold my own hand in the dark. Lauren was a chapter. Maya is a chapter. And I am the whole book. Not all stories are love stories. But this one turned out to be. Not the love I thought I wanted, but the love I finally believed I deserved. And when people ask me what changed, I don't tell them about the heartbreak or the betrayal or the therapy or the silence. I tell them this. One morning, I poured a single cup of coffee, stood barefoot in my kitchen, looked out the window at a potted lavender plant, and smiled. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. Because I wasn't missing anything. Because I was home.